Hello and welcome back once again to CBR MTG. My name is Angus Mackay and I'm joined here by Philip Nicholson.
Hello there.
And we are watching round 6 of the Australian National Highlander Championship at CANCON 2019, hosted by GoodGames and the Games Capital. Very big event, as we've mentioned in previous videos. But we can see, opening up our current hand, I think I see a Steamkin on Chris's side. Going to be a nice showing from Chris's blue-red burn deck. So, Phil, this is not too dissimilar from a deck that you've played in the past, affectionately named TM55. Why don't you tell us about this deck and how it looks and how it's compared?
Yeah, I mean, so the basic idea is to play sort of your cheap tempo E threats, stuff like Delver of Secrets and Young Pyromancer, and Monastery Swiftspear. But then instead of playing kind of your Spell Pierce, Counterspell, full tempo package, you pack all those slots up with Burn and a couple of cantrips to smooth your draws out, and you just try and kill your opponent as quickly as possible. And the blue gives you all sorts of powerful tools, from options like Time Twister, Time Walk, Ancestral Recall, Treasure Cruise, all sorts of like great point options like that.
At the moment, there isn't any red pointed cards, if I'm not mistaken. So it really makes gives you something tangible to actually play with if you wanted to play a full suite of 7 points, which a lot of people do. But playing either Ancestral Recall or Time Walk can be a very suitable option for these style of decks.
Yeah, I mean, you can, if you want to play like a mono-red kind of style of burn, play a Lotus and a Ruby, but obviously that's prohibitively expensive for some people, and I think that while the Lotus Ruby style is certainly explosive, the blue points are just so consistent that it's pretty hard to turn away from them.
Yeah. It looks like Chris is playing just sort of a normal suite of good red cards in for his points with True Nemesis, Snapcaster Mage, and Time Twister. I can't see anything else.
Ancestral Recall.
Ancestral Recall will take up those 4 points as well. So yeah, just that Ancestral Recall being one of the main sort of draws to this sort of style of deck where you're trying to play as many quick and easy cards as possible, and Ancestral Recall definitely being one of those big ones.
Yeah, and when it's kind of the thing with burn in every format is that every card in your hand kind of virtually represents damage, and so you need to be able to convert that as efficiently as possible. You want every card in your hand to do the most amount of damage possible so that you can get your opponent to 0 and win the game. And when you're playing a card like Ancestral Recall, in this kind of burn style deck, it turns one card into 3 cards, which is a huge increase in damage.
Yeah.
It's kind of a strange way of thinking about Ancestral Recall as a card that says something like do 6 damage to your opponent, but that's kind of how it works in this sort of deck.
Yeah, definitely. And looking at Luke's side, he's playing a Aluren combo deck, which some of the cards, some of the cards do say Aluren on them, which is
well, one
start.
of them, luckily.
But yeah, this is not your normal 2-card combo deck. We're actually including a couple of different options in the form of, so you have Aluren, Cavern Harpy, and Skymarch Bloodletter as one of the infinite combos, as well as we're seeing a food chain just for value, but also we're searching out with using Birthing Pod, we're searching out Restoration Angel / Splinter Twin and Deceiver Exarch / Pestamite. So we've got a couple of combos coiling
There's
around.
There's also a Sahili Rai to go with a Faladar Guardian.
Oof.
You can pod into that cat as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So using the Birthing Pod to kind of just string together your combo pieces, also playing 6 points in Vampiric Tutor and Demonic Tutor, and then the last point on Birthing Pod. So just basically putting a bunch of 2-card combos in and hoping that they line up the way that they need to.
Yeah, I mean, there's decks also playing a couple of 0-point tutors in Aladdin Call and Grim Tutor, and then a lot of the kind of, as you might expect of an Aluren deck if you're familiar with it from Legacy, a lot of the cheap creatures that you're hoping to cast for free off Aluren cantrip in some fashion. So your cards like Elvish Visionary, Baleful Strix, and Coiling Oracle are good with Aluren in that way. They're great to pot out of, and they're good to go up the food chain with as well. And they help you just kind of draw to those key combo pieces and try to string a win together.
Yeah. So food chain, in this aspect, not any Mist Hollow Griffins or Squee Immortal in this deck, unfortunately, but you can kind of, as you mentioned, use it as your second copy of Birthing Pod by, if you have the cards in hand, you can Eternal Witness, get back some value, and then food chain Eternal Witness for a 4-drop. And then if you have a 4-drop in hand, you can kind of do that. So you're using sort of like virtual Birthing Pod effects within the form of your card draw and your sort of just value coming out of regular creatures like that.
The card choice that I think is really interesting that Luke's made here is the Leovold Emissary of Trust. Kind of just a value card. It doesn't necessarily contribute to the combo game plan, but I guess he just thinks that it's so good that if you're in the colors, you just have to play it. Yeah,
it's definitely something that people look to when they're porting a format, a regular deck into a Highlander deck, where they see how many cards they can take from the normal version and then see if they can put it into the Highlander version. And Leovold does see some play in the Aluren lists in Legacy.
Sure.
Just as a good creature. Like, if you're in those colors and you're playing creatures that have abilities that you can pot into and stuff, like, it's hard not to get away from that 3-mana, 3/3 Haymaker,
Yeah, I mean, in Legacy, you've got a decent kind of mid-range backup plan. I'm not sure how well that backup plan translates to Highlander, given that in a lot of instances your creature quality drops. There's a big difference between a Baleful Strix and an Elvish Visionary.
Yeah.
Strix is a lot better, but there is still something that resembles that backup plan in play, which is always nice to have when you don't want to lose the game because your Aluren gets countered or it gets destroyed by an Assassin's Trophy or whatever. You want to have some kind of backup plan, whatever that may be.
And that's completely reasonable. And I mean, Chris, as you mentioned before, being very, very aggressive. I mean, this attack is exactly what Chris wants to be doing, and you probably wouldn't see it any other way with the Self-Scar Mage having prowess and the Steamkin basically just growing every time you cast a burn spell. So
no, I mean, he does lose a creature to the Restoration Angel that Luke flashed in, but to be honest, if I was in Chris's shoes and that had been a main phase Restoration Angel, who knew it was there, I would have made that exact same attack anyway.
Yeah.
You've cracked Luke down to 5 and you've got a True Name in play. If you've got any kind of burn in hand, you've got Luke dead next turn. So
yeah, that's reasonable.
It's a pretty good sequence of events from Chris. It's unfortunate that the Steamkin didn't crack in, because then if you had a Lightning Bolt or something like that, I can't quite see exactly what's in Chris's hand, but I'm sure he's got something, given how much burns he's at. Top card might be a Skullcrack. But, one turn versus 2 turns, you'll take what you can get if you don't have an answer to the Restoration Angel.
Yeah, it definitely seems interesting. And it seems to almost certainly be an act of desperation for Luke to flash in that Restoration Angel, considering Chris has mana up, and he can definitely surmise that Chris is playing some amount of burn spells. So if it's just like a small bolt to the Restoration Angel that makes the Steamkin a 3/3, and then like they end up trading, and I think he was just doing it because he was hoping that he wouldn't die from it, but I think he's just dead to the Skullcrack, unfortunately. Which is funny because he had the combo in hand.
Yeah, I mean, just a bit too slow. True Name plus Skullcrack will get Chris there, and he'll take away game number 1.
Yeah. Going into sideboards now, on Luke's side, we have Ferry Macabre, Null Rod, Stony Silence, Rest in Peace, Mist Caller, Fourth Bridge Prowler, Defense of the Heart, Arishan Cleric, Bitter Blossom, Reclamation Sage, Aura Shards, Hydroblast, Blue Elemental Blast, Carpet of Flowers, and Voice of Resurgence. And then on Chris's side, we have Goblin Crater Maker, Null Rod, Energy Flux, Abrade, Sudden Demise, Submerge, Searing Blood, Direfleet Daredevil, Eidolon of the Great Revel, Hydroblast, Pyroblast, Red Elemental Blast, Fairy Macabre, Grafdigger's Cage, and Rampaging Frostodon. So Rampaging Frostodon does sound pretty okay to bring in, considering the amount of creatures that Luke was playing. It might be too slow, but it definitely will 100% get some damage in.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of what Chris saw in game one, unless Chris had scouted the deck out beforehand, all he saw was Restoration Angel and a Pestamite and ways to go infinite with it in the form of Kiki Jiki.
Yeah.
And Rampaging Ferocidon definitely does a lot of damage if your opponent's trying to make that happen.
Yes. Yes, that's very true.
It also, incidentally, is quite good against the Aluren plan that Luke's got going on, even if Chris hasn't necessarily seen that. I think the Rampaging Ferocidon is excellent here. I'd also definitely be bringing in Submerge. That's a pretty easy take against any deck that is playing creatures in his green.
It looks like he's thumbing the blasts to the front as well, which would definitely make sense considering most of Luke's combo pieces. Even if Chris knew that he was playing Aluren as well, then that kind of stops up that combo as well because you can kill the Cavern Harpy.
Well, not really.
Well, yeah, sure. So you can pay an extra life to return it. Yeah, that's reasonable.
But you can kill a lot of the pieces that Cavern Harpy combos with, something like a Coiling Oracle or a Baleful Strix. And it's just possible that he thinks that those blasts just have a bit more text, at least the red blasts rather than the Hydro Blast.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think also if you know or suspect the Aluren plan, it makes the Eidolon of the Great Revel very good. Yeah. Because that'll also kill your opponent really quickly if they want to cast Cavern Harpy 20 times.
Oh yeah. It looks like Chris is thinking about taking out the Dak Faden and the Shrine of Burning Rage, which is probably considerably reasonable.
Those are very slow.
Yeah, just a little bit too slow. Like Chris has got a very fast deck, but you can see he's got a couple of bits and bobs just to try and get a little bit of reach in the late game. With Dak Faden just being a supremely good sort of card filtering engine for the late game, and Shrine of Burning Rage doing a pretty similar thing main board. So I'd absolutely be okay with taking those out and replacing them. He does see the Rampage and Ferocidon line, which is very good, and the Submerge that we mentioned before.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of pieces in Luke's sideboard that are alright. Obviously the blasts are great because you're going to want to be countering all sorts of burn, everything from a Lightning Bolt to a Price of Progress.
Do you like Carpet of Flowers in this matchup?
I think it's fine because, ultimately, if Carpet of Flowers is making at least 1 mana a turn, it's only a 1 mana spell. That's a pretty good mana dork. So I think I'd be pretty okay bringing it in. Arish and Cleric is pretty excellent here. It's a 1/3 that gains you some life when it enters the battlefield. So if you've got any of your ways to flicker it going on, it also blocks pretty well. Without a fair number of prowess triggers, a Swift Spear or a Soulscar Mage is going to really struggle to beat through an Arish and Cleric. So I think that there's definitely a few pieces that Luke can bring in.
It's a very interesting sideboard. A lot of cards that I had never known of before, but you can definitely tell that he's trying to use the ETB effects to his fullest advantage. Pretty good with Birthing Pod, just playing it, getting the value of the ETB and then potting into your next thing. But I definitely want to see Luke win a game by casting Arish and Cleric and copying it with Saheeli and flicking it with Restoration Angel and then just burying Chris in game 3 life triggers. But we'll see how it actually pans out. But it's certainly what I'm hoping to see. It looks like we're going straight to our opening hand now already with Luke having a Preordain, a couple of lands, and a Baleful Strix, if I'm not mistaken, in his opening hand. I think he's probably considering keeping it. I think I would in this situation. The hand seems definitely fine.
Well, you've got a 7-card hand with some lands and a blue cantrip, and one of your lands casts the blue cantrip. I think the other cards in your hand have to be pretty shocking to not keep that.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
I think that card on top there is Quickling, which is a 2-mana 2/2 flying flash. When it enters the battlefield, you have to bounce a creature or sacrifice it. So
which is usually a downside, but not in Luke's case when he's trying to get multiple ETB effects.
You're trying to get multiple triggers. It's also kind of a way of, I guess, protecting other creatures from removal sometimes. It's not the best blocker or anything in the world, and I think that is an Arish and Cleric in Luke's hand there. I think we're
I'm ready.
about to go on a wild ride if Luke's got a white source.
He has, I think that's a Bloodstained Mire in his far hand there, so he'll have some sort of white mana. I assume being packed to the brim with dual lands being a 5-color deck, if I'm not mistaken, all the way up to 5.
I think so. I think it's kind of just white and just red, but it is both of those colors and therefore a 5-color deck. Yeah. So he's I think he does have the Irish and Cleric, but he's opted to run out the Baleful Strix here because
we can still get a scrub land with this fetch, and it will work out fine.
Yeah, so the advantage of running out the Baleful Strix here is if you do want to get multiple uses out of your Cleric, you don't want to run into a Lightning Bolt or something like that.
Yep, definitely reasonable.
You're not in immediate danger of dying either, so there's no need to gain the life now. And if you're worried about days, he might just not think the Strix is valuable. Or if he's got a few more combo pieces than I've been able to make out in his hand, then getting the kind of the more combo-oriented creature in the Baleful Strix first. Might be the better play. He's gone for a Badlands here, though. So,
which is pretty interesting. I'm not 100% sure if I agree with that line, but he's probably feeling pretty comfortable. He might have another land in hand that we're not aware of, but with the Arishan, like, he does have Quickling in hand as well, so he could just wait until he gets to 4 mana, and then he can Arishan, and then have the mana to bounce it with Quickling.
Yeah, I think he's pretty likely to try and go for a Quickling on this Baleful Strix unless he's got a better play once, if and when Chris taps out. I guess I can't see all the cards in his hand. He might have something else he wants to do. He's also got a Demonic Tutor, I believe, so he might just be... Yeah, he's just casting that.
That seems reasonable.
It's the card he drew off the Baleful Strix, so...
Must be nice to have that black mana when you need it.
Yeah. Didn't quite see what that card was, but he seemed very sure of what he wanted.
Yeah.
He didn't even check the rest of his deck to see if there was something else there.
Well, that's the benefit of playing those... it's just a Hydroblast, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Well, it stops keeps Baleful Strix alive, that's for sure. So he's got... He
it stops...
tuned out the Hydroblast.
Stops a lot of things. So he's got another fetch land if he really wants to cast Cleric. He's got fetch land, Brainstorm, Ponder. He's got certainly got a lot of pieces. A handful
of cantrips, that's right, and a Hydroblast to sort of back it up as well. Mostly protecting against Pyroblast, but of course...
I think he's mostly really worried about like a Price of Progress or a Blood Moon.
Yeah.
Which I think we're gonna see him leave up that Volcanic Island as much as possible. Maybe a bit less now that he's seen the hand. But given his mana base is what you might call basic light, with a swamp and an island being the only basics to be seen.
He wants to protect himself against Blood Moon.
Yeah, and given Chris was about to have his turn 3, tutoring for the Hydroblast and leaving that open was almost certainly a hedge against that kind of effect.
Yeah, I think he's playing around it pretty expertly with playing out the Thoughtseize as well as having the Hydroblast backup because he really doesn't want to lose to Blood Moon. And I mean, that's not how that card works. There we go.
I am actually interested to see that Luke has kept in Thoughtseize in post-board games.
Yeah.
Usually that's just about the first card I sideboard out against any kind of burn deck.
He doesn't have the replacement duress by the looks of it, so that could be... Oh, he has it in the main board, sure.
Well, so. It's just like, if you Thoughtseize your opponent and take a burn spell, you've kind of burnt yourself anyway.
Yeah.
So
even if it's costing you a card.
It costs you a card and it costs you a mana, so you're down on tempo as well. I guess in this specific situation, Luke is possibly a bit more afraid of some haymakers like your moons and things like that. So it's got a bit more of a reason to stay in the deck.
And if anyone ever complains about Blood Moon or Back to Basics being too good for the format, then maybe they should watch Luke multiplay because this is him playing a 5-color deck, and he's perfectly protected against Blood Moon because he's taken the extra precautions to stop himself dying to it.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember that Blood Moon is a card and you don't randomly choose to lose the game for no reason, then it's not that difficult. Sometimes you attack with your creature land on turn 4 and lose, but not everyone is that bad at Magic.
Yeah, look, we can only be so lucky. And speaking of lucky, here comes the Arishan Cleric, cleaning up some of the life lost from the Thoughtseize.
Yeah. He's even got the Hydroblast to protect that Cleric. So
yeah, very nice. I think possibly we do know that Chris has a Daze in hand, so it could be a consideration in response to the Grim Lava, not the Grim Lava activation itself, but the cracking of the fetch land. He can do the thing, but it looks like Chris is just taking it nice and slow, because if Chris didn't know that he had a Blue Blast in hand, he might consider waiting for Chris to fetch, not have the mana up for Grim Lavamancer activation, and then go for it. But he's not going to make the first
I mean,
move.
you're only Lavamancering a Baleful Drix. It's not exactly something I'm excited to do with my time.
Sure. Irish and Clerics are 1/3?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Card's broken.
It's too busted.
I don't know.
How does Chris attack into a 1/3?
How does anyone beat a 1/3 for 2 that gains you life? It's just obscene.
Yeah, it seems very good.
And now that Luke has tapped out, Chris is opting to fetch. He's got a pretty wide variety of options at his disposal, so it'll be interesting to see exactly what he chooses to go with.
Yeah. He's got a lot of, well, he's also leaving himself open to the days that he knows is in Chris's hand, so I'm not sure exactly what
I don't think he really cares if he gets his Brainstorm dazed. He's got things going on, he's got a Ponder as well, so
I guess that's reasonable.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, good opportunity to, and he is going to go for the days, sure. Well, he did use his mana about as effectively as he could have by using that burn spell on the Arishan Cleric to stop it from being flickered for any future turns. So unfortunately, we won't be able to see Luke go up to 100 life.
That is quite tragic. And there was unfortunately no possibility of regeneration for that poor Cleric, because I believe it was incinerated.
Oh, that is quite the shame.
Yeah, but it does, that is 3 points of damage that's not going to Luke's face. So in a way, that Arishan Cleric gains 6 life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a really big deal against
Burn.
Burn, yeah, that's it's one of those. I'll make another weird comparison here, but it's kind of like you Mind Rotted your opponent.
Yeah,
for way less mana.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is pretty good.
Yeah, I'd take that for sure. Like Mind Rot, not particularly playable in Highlander, but this sequence of events worked out pretty well.
It's more playable when it costs 2 and it takes 2 good cards rather than 2 bad cards.
Yes,
Him to Torok, very playable in Highlander.
That's true. That's very true. Mind Twist also being a sort of mainstay in the format when, at its very worst, it's a Mind Rot anyway, so there you go. I guess it's a 2-mana Thoughtseize at its worst.
Well, you take a random card, not get to see the hand and take what you want, but I guess if you're really lucky, it's basically a 2-mana Thoughtseize. So
that's the only consideration I'm making. So
alright, sure.
We'll see what Luke's follow-up is. Looks like he's going to play out this Cavern Harpy, lose a little chunk of life with that Mana Confluence, but opting to keep his Savannah... No, it's not a Savannah, is it?
I believe it's Savannah Taiga.
Savannah Taiga, yeah.
It could be Scrubland Taiga, because those 2 lands do look almost identical, but I think it's Savannah Taiga.
Okay, I'll take that for sure. And Searing Blaze, if I'm not mistaken.
Ooh, that is a pretty nasty one.
So Luke's going to... It fizzles the spell, if I'm not mistaken.
No, because I'm pretty sure Searing Blaze, it targets the player as well as the creature.
Sure. Target creature, target player.
Yeah, so it won't fizzle the spell. It'll still deal the 3 to Luke, and he'll have to pay the 1 life to Cavern Harpy. But he gets to keep his Harpy for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, he does have to pay the 1 life, which is unfortunate, but it looks like they're both discussing the how that spell resolves, but it looks like it's working out pretty well in Chris's favour. Searing Blaze has been a pretty strong card.
Yeah, well, I mean, Searing Blaze is definitely working out in Chris's favour, but overall, the game isn't going exactly where he'd want it to be. It's kind of turn 6, I think, here, maybe even higher than that. And Luke's still on a pretty healthy 13 life.
Yeah, still has a grip of cards, still has a little bit of interaction. Can replay that Cavern Harpy.
You can replay Cavern Harpy, or you can just replay Baleful Strix.
Yeah.
Seems probably a bit better.
Yeah,
just playing a Harpy into an empty board. But he's also got a food chain here, which is pretty interesting.
Very nice. Very nice indeed.
It'll be interesting to see.
I'm not 100% sure if... food chain costs 3?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. I thought it was a 4-mana spell, but that's okay.
No, it's green and 2.
Nice. So, yeah, just playing that out. Not exactly for the infinite combo, as we mentioned before, not being able to play Mist Hologriffin nor Squee the Immortal, but he does have, he does have options. He can just use it for value, which is very reasonable as well.
Yeah. So there's basically no threat of that food chain being removed against the blue-red deck.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty unlikely that Chris has sideboarded in something like Chaos Warp, even if he has one in his sideboard.
Yeah.
Which he doesn't. But even if he did, you probably wouldn't be bringing it in against this kind of deck. So you're not really expecting something like food chain to ever get removed once it's in play.
May as well just use it for value while you got it.
May as well run it out when you've got the spare mana.
Yeah, for sure.
And see what you can muster up.
We're seeing Baleful Strix kind of being the engine of this deck because this is the third time that we're going to draw a card from it with Felidar Guardian. I can only assume flickering the Baleful Strix to draw an extra card. Yep, looks like it. And getting the Imperial Recruiter, not bad. Not bad.
Yeah. So I'm not sure...
You know, I don't think
exactly
we can really set up any combo from here. Yeah, probably not.
You can't get the Aluren is probably the biggest problem. If you could get the Aluren, you'd be sitting pretty.
Yeah.
But I think without being able to get the Aluren, there's certainly a few more steps that have to be jumped through. But Luke seems pretty willing to go for something here. He's going to exile that Cavern Harpy and cast the Quickling, looks like.
It looks like it. Unfortunately, not getting back the cleric, the Arishan cleric from before, but we can take back our Felidar Guardian. I see in response, so he's trying to bounce the Quickling and then instead, while the trigger is on the stack, just sacrificing it to Food Chain.
Yeah, I believe that's what's going on there. He's just going up a mana.
Yeah. So using Baleful Strix to cast Quickling. And should have 1 mana floating if I'm not mistaken, and then he'll be able to use that extra mana. So it should be 4 mana in pool right now if I'm not mistaken.
It also means that you have access to multiple colors if you do that. Because otherwise, when you exile Baleful Strix, you only get 1, which is much worse. So then he's doing the same thing with Cavern Harpy to, I would imagine, put red in his pool, so that now he's got the ability to cast this Recruiter and still have a bit of mana left over.
Yeah, for sure. So we are going up 1 more mana again, so we should have 5 mana. Not 100% sure of each color, but because the Cavern Harpy exiles to Food Chain for +1 of his choice of color, you can kind of start just ramping up the Food Chain, as we saw before.
That is in fact what the card was intended to do. It's not what it sometimes does in varying formats, but it's certainly. This is kind of Food Chain functioning as intended, which is a little interesting in a format like Highlander with so many broken interactions that you're kind of using Food Chain in the fair way. And he's just gonna find himself a Kiki-Jiki and make himself a whole lot of cats.
And being just taken away there by the Food Chain going up the chain, which was very impressive by Luke's side. But you can see how we kind of thought of it as like a kind of birthing pod aspect where you're making a little bit of mana so that you can cast everything in your hand as opposed to fetching them out from your library.
It's way better than birthing pod. Birthing pod taps.
Yeah, but sometimes you play things that untap birthing pod, but it's in that instance it was pretty much perfect.
Yeah. Well, I think he had a little bit of spare mana left over, so it wasn't quite perfect. Clearly the perfect line would have you casting Kiki-Jiki with no mana in pool. But winning the game is pretty good, even if it's not perfect.
And we can only strive for winning the game. Sometimes perfect is just a little bit too much, but we will go into game 3 for this one. We'll see if they try and make some last-minute sideboard changes for this last game, but
I think I did see Luke pull something out when they went to sideboards. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but it looked like he had one card in particular he decided he wanted to swap up for game 3, which might be a change after he's seen a bit more of Chris's deck, or it might be one of those kind of play draw decisions that people sometimes make.
Yeah, that's definitely reasonable.
There's a lot of cards that are much worse on the draw than they are on the play. All sorts of hand disruption, as well as cards like Daze, which Luke isn't playing Daze, but he's playing the Thoughtseers and the Duress and an Inquisition of Kozilek, so any of those seem like pretty reasonable choices to pull out on the draw.
It looks like it took out his the entirety of the Splinter Twin combo, possibly because it all dies to Bolt.
Yeah, Deceiver Exarch doesn't. Deceiver Exarch's a 1/4.
Okay, sure.
But I think that's not necessarily unreasonable. It's pretty fair to take out Splinter Twin. Just doesn't really. It's a great way to get 2-for-1s, and Chris does have a fair number of ways of interacting with it at instant speed.
And I mean, when you're playing mono combo pieces, like something's got to give.
Yeah.
You know? It's okay to take out one combo if it means that you're making the rest of the deck stronger for the other combos.
Definitely.
And yeah, look, I really like the look of the deck. It's very hard to not go directly into 5 colors when you're playing a pod deck because you just want as much like versatility as possible.
Yeah, well, it's kind of one of those things where a card like Kiki Jiki is almost impossible to cast properly with the mana base. You can technically do it, but you're just almost never going to be fetching in such a way as you actually have all of that red mana.
Yeah.
But you've got quite a few ways to cast it unfairly, and because you're in blue, even if you do draw it and you don't have food chain, you have the birthing pod instead, you can shuffle it back in with a brainstorm, which is pretty nice, because I've certainly seen a few birthing pod lists in my time that were just kind of playing Kiki Jiki and really hoping they didn't draw it, which is a little bit more loose. But you definitely got a few different options with this deck on what to do if you do draw a card like that you can't really cast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see both their opening hands look pretty good. I mean, I don't know if this is the full 7 from Chris's side. It looks like he may have mulled to 6, but you got that Wheel of Fortune as the card advantage that you get in red.
2-drop into Wheel of Fortune on the play is pretty good. Drawing an Ancestral Recall maybe changes it up a little bit. It might still be worth it depending on what Luke does with his turn, because if Luke plays a cantripping creature, or even better, something like a brainstorm or a ponder, and tries to set up his draws like that, ruining the combo deck's kind of hard work and setting up their draws with Wheel of Fortune can be really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not necessarily a redundant combo deck. Like, we do see a couple of different combos, but they don't really combo off with each other. You're kind of like trying to find 2 cards that go together. So if you make your opponent discard their entire combo hand and then get them to try and rebuild it with a fresh 7, like, it's just going to be a completely different issue.
Yeah, I think that it certainly leads to an interesting decision point for Chris for what he wants to do with his turn 3. I think he is sitting on Chain Lightning as well as Lightning Bolt, so he's probably pretty incentivized to go for the Ancestral Recall and Lightning Bolt lines.
Yep.
It's really mana efficient. You can cast Wheel of Fortune later, and this is also going to grow the Steamkin more because you're casting just more red spells.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think there's certainly an argument to be made for the Wheel of Fortune. It was probably his intended line before he had to go and draw Ancestral Recall and just ruin everything.
Don't you hate it when that happens?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I prefer to have it in my opening hand, and then I can cast it in my opponent's upkeep. But I guess drawing it on turn 2 it's fine.
Just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. His hand is lining up pretty well, though. He might just want to use the Wheel of Fortune when he runs out of good plays, but just keep it sandbagging it until he either thinks that Luke's about to combo off, or he just wants a fresh set of cards.
Yeah, there's no need to snap it off at the moment now that he's got the Ancestral to fuel what he's doing. Kind of a decent sort of breakpoint for where you want to cast a Wheel of Fortune is when you don't have a land to play anymore.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
You just don't have other things to do with your mana, but Chris has got plenty of things going on, and Luke hasn't spent that much time and energy kind of cantripping and setting up his draws for you to kind of have that line of trying to ruin what he's doing. So at the moment, you may as well just run out your threats and your mana as efficiently as you possibly can. I think it is interesting he didn't elect to attack with the Runaway Steamkin and bluff something like a Lightning Bolt. But
it's kind of no downside, right?
Probably doesn't really matter in the long term, but certainly could have been a couple of points in misdamage.
Yeah.
But he has run out a Harsh Mentor here on his turn 2, which was a little while ago, but I really like that against Luke's deck. It's great against his mana base, obviously, as it's full of fetches. but it also has text against a couple of the different pieces of the combo.
Sahili gets done by... Oh, it's
no,
not
it doesn't
Planeswalkers.
hit Planeswalkers, but it does hit Cavern Harpy, because
Okay.
the pay 1 life to return it to your hand is
Tapping Kiki-Jiki?
Tapping Kiki-Jiki, or activating a creature enchanted with Splinter Twin. We know that Splinter Twin has been sideboarded out here, but it's certainly a consideration when you're making that sideboarding decision.
Yeah, I can agree with that for sure.
And Harsh Mentor's fail state is 2 for a 2/2, which is probably not something you would just play in Highlander, but that's the worst possible situation for Harsh Mentor, and already Luke's sitting on a polluted Delta, so Harsh Mentor is doing better than that.
Yeah. It's just like when you're thinking about those 2/2s for 2s, you want to, especially in Burn, you want to try and think about, is it better than Eidolon of the Great Revel?
Yeah.
Like, Eidolon is an insane card, and that's a great 2/2 for 2. But Harsh Mentor, kind of close. Like, not exactly the same, but pretty close.
The downside that Eidolon of the Great Revel can have, especially in Highlander, and especially in a deck like this that's playing those blue cards, and those blue cantrips and those blue points, is that Eidolon really hurts you a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes more than it hurts your opponent, and sometimes you're not okay with that. Where in any kind of situation where your opponent's game plan is to directly pressure your life total, it's why Chris and a lot of these blue-red burn decks opt to play Eidolon of the Great Revel in the sideboard.
Okay.
Because while it is great in some matchups, it's great against most combo decks, it's good against control, but if you come up against an aggro or even a mid-range deck, and your game plan is to run out an Eidolon, you're probably just going to burn yourself to death way faster than you're going to hurt your opponent.
Yeah, that's probably reasonable. And it looks like Luke has pulled Chris up on the Steamkin trigger, because he did say... It's an interesting one, because I think there was still a time where Luke was deciding whether or not it resolved, that he could have said, end Steamkin. But I mean, it is the National Highlander Championships, and you want to play... It is... I believe they were playing at competitive rules enforcement level, so...
Yeah.
You want to try and make it as clean as possible and make sure that everyone hits their thing. But it looks like he's decided to let the trigger go through anyway.
Yeah, he just wanted to respond in case Chris has something to do with mana, I guess.
Sure.
Because it does take those 3 counters to make mana with the Steamkin.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
a great
Chris
point.
has then
That's a
done
great
and
point.
cashed in for Chain Lightning plus an Eidolon and the Great Revel, which is a pretty nice set of things, and now he's just sitting on that Wheel of Fortune. So if he draws a 1-drop or a land on his next turn, he will be an incredibly happy lad.
And no shortage of 1-drops in his deck either. So I think the likelihood, I mean, even then, like you pull the top card, you decide whether or not you want to cast it, and then if it's worth keeping a hold of, it has to be pretty good,
Yeah, well, like, honestly, at a reasonably quick glance at his deck list, I don't think there is a card left that personally I would be keeping over Casting Wheel. He seems to disagree. He wants to cast this Searing Blaze. But I mean, I guess that's probably because it's lethal. So
no fun.
It is much less fun than Casting Wheel, but winning the game, it's pretty good.
I really wonder about the people who choose to win the game over drawing 7 cards.
It is pretty baffling. I don't really understand, but so Chris will take out this match.
Yeah, that was very impressive on Chris's side, and that burn deck was definitely a force to be reckoned with for poor Luke. So Chris will take it out 2-1. And then stay tuned for round 7. We have previously already showed the top 8. So if you are first coming in on this video, I highly recommend going through our plethora of videos from this event. These will be the last 2 that you'll see, so round 6 and round 7. So please stay tuned for the last final round.